You are listening to Be Amplified, the podcast with Bri Thais, episode number 35. Hey Amplifiers, welcome to Be Amplified, the podcast. My name is Thais.
And I'm Bri Thais. We are the co-founders of the Amplify Collective,
a movement aimed at radically disrupting how purpose-driven women connect and operate in the world.
Because we believe it's not just what you do, but who you are that matters.
Each week, join us for messages and interviews that will leave you feeling amplified and ready to change the world.
Let's do this. Amplify. It's Bri Thais.
Thais, Sky.
We're here.
Monday.
Ready to have an epic conversation with you. This, oddly enough, is a conversation that Thais and I have had already. We recorded an episode on this last season, and I was talking to women. They were so excited about it, and I get this text from Thais one day that's like, please don't hate me.
Don't hate me. It disappeared.
It's gone.
I think I thought I saved it, but I didn't save it, and so I recorded right over it.
Yep.
It was really good too. So here's part 2.
We're going to try and recreate it.
I'm sure it's going to be even better.
The good news is you didn't know what the first one was, so you have no frame of reference as to how good or bad this conversation will be.
But we're going to talk on debt.
Yeah,
and personal debt, really specifically, and having debt and carrying debt and
the concept of debt,
the public image of debt. This is something that most people don't talk about yet. Most people carry, and there's a lot of shame around debt and having debt and all the debts. And so we're going to talk about it because both Bri and I have debt, love debt, become best friends with debt, fucked debt, and then broke up with debt, and then got more debt. So now we're here. And so we get to talk to you about it from personal experience with debt. Here's the thing. There's a lot of stigma that there's some debt that are acceptable.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And some that aren't.
Yeah. Mortgage
is a completely acceptable form of debt, which is really funny because in other countries, like my native country of Brazil, you don't actually you don't go into debt to buy a house. It's very hard to get loans for houses. So you basically have to buy a house outright, which is why a lot of people actually build their own homes because they don't have the capacity to buy a home. Buying a home is a big deal in Brazil. It's very difficult, and it requires you to have a lot of money outright, and a lot of people don't have that type of money, which is why slums are a big thing there. So in the United States, it's acceptable that you don't have money to buy a house. That's okay. You can go into a loan for 50 million years, and then eventually
it's not that long.
You're gonna own this house that you have unconsciously believed is yours.
Well, and so the even funnier conversation about that is I'm actually looking at buying for the second time. I was a homeowner when I was 26 in Olympia, Washington. And it is literally the only thing that I will ever tell you that I regret in my life. I do not live with regrets, and I will tell you I regret buying that house.
I mean, you have expressed this to us before, and I think it's really interesting that that's a regret that you have because a lot of people are really excited about owning a home.
Well, but this is the thing, though. Think about it. This is what I was going to say is that, our parents, like my parents' mortgage, paid off. Paid off because our parents lived very different lifestyles. They stayed in one spot. And not to say that we don't stay in one spot, but in general, millennials tend to be a little bit more transient. We tend to be a little bit more adventurous. How many millennials do you know right now who don't actually have a home and just travel from place to place to place to place?
But that wasn't our choice. The reason why we don't own homes is because we can't fucking afford it.
I mean, I think it's a combination of a few different things. I think a little bit of it is cultural and a lot of it is opportunity. But, in this thing about, it was always a good idea to go into debt, back in the day, it was a good idea to go into debt to buy a house because you'd be in it for 30 years. You would at one point own it and then you would sell it.
Yeah.
Now, I only owned my house for 3 years and I actually ended up short selling it. So I took a huge hit on my credit and I walked out of that house with, I think, a $600 check and only because there was some sort of special something or another going on that if you sold a house, you got a check. What's
your point here?
The construct of going into debt for a home has completely
I
changed, is
see.
what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
in the 50s, it made sense. Even in the
Yes.
80s, it made sense.
Yeah, which is why less and less people are buying homes. Millennials aren't buying homes so much later, not getting married till later, not having children till later. One, because we're just strapped down by student loans, which
That was the other
is
form
also a
of
very,
acceptable debt that I was going to
which is
mention.
actually terrifying because student loans are an acceptable form of debt. But unlike a mortgage, if you go bankrupt, you actually can't absolve your student loans. You are still required to pay your student
I
loans.
didn't know that.
Yeah, it's the only debt that if you claim bankruptcy, you can't remove yourself from. Like you are stuck with. And yet, we live in a society, we grew up believing that you can be anything you want to be and you have to go to college and it's going to cost you a ridiculous amount of money. I uh my number one regret was the college that I went to. I love BU. I love the experience I had there. And I did not understand when I was making that decision what I was getting myself into. And my parents tried to teach me, they tried to share with me. What's really interesting is that when I got my loan for school, I asked my bank how much I was going to be paying per month when I got out of school. And no one could answer that question because they said, well, it depends and it depends and we don't know and whatever. And so I never understood that as I graduated, I would be paying $700 a month in student loans. And I had the privilege of only paying for 1 year of my school. My parents paid for two. I was responsible for two. I graduated early, so I only had to pay for one. But if you imagine some people who went to this private institution and had to pay all 4 years, they would be four times 700. I mean, $3,000 a month in student loans. And again, I so desperately wish I understood what that meant. I so desperately wished that I understood how much money I was going to be making coming out of college, or else I would have wholeheartedly have gone to my state school, where right now I would be debt free. Putting kids into debt before they even start their lives is an atrocity of our system because you have no rights to do anything else because you're strapped down by loans. It's heartbreaking. I can't travel the world. I can't do all these things if I'm 21 years old and I graduated with $500,000 in debt. And that's not even going to law school or med school, where, my boyfriend's brother and his wife both went to medical schools and they are paying an exorbitant amount of money. And luckily, they get to make more money, but it's just really fucked the system up. It's
I
really sucks.
Yeah, I was watching Dawson's Creek, and as you know, I'm the same age as they were, and so as I was getting ready to go into college, they were also ready to go into college. And Joey says something in one of the episodes about, like, why would I choose to take on this huge responsibility of debt? Like, as I haven't even started a life yet.
I don't understand how our system is so set up for this. It's heartbreaking. It's really unfortunate. And many of us, like myself, just got caught up in the belief that you would graduate making like 70, 80K. I mean, that was the big promise.
But even then, the problem is 70 or 80K isn't enough to
No.
afford $1,000 or $2,000 in student loans a month.
I mean, right now, you need to be making at least $75,000 a year to live an average life. And most people in our country make like 30 to 40. And that's not enough, which is then no wonder that our system is so set up that people who are in a different socioeconomic class don't get education because they can't fucking afford it, because who can afford $1,000 in debt every month? But then they don't get the same opportunities because they can't afford college. And so then it continues to make this really fucked up system in our country where the white people keep going up and people who can't, or not all white people, of course, there's plenty of white people who are poor, but the privileged people get to keep being more and more privileged, while people who are oppressed because of financial situation stays more and more oppressed. And it's a really messed up system. But that's not the point of this conversation.
And I mean, our system too is also designed to keep us in this place of lack at the same time.
Yeah.
So then we layer on top of the house debt and the
Student
loan debt,
Yeah.
all of this other debt for us spending all this money to keep up with the Joneses. So
yes, like credit card debt,
shopping. I mean, every woman's magazine is designed to keep you broken. It is designed to keep you wanting all of the things and to be spending all that money, because if you buy the newest lipstick, if you buy the next pair of shoes, if you buy all these things and go into debt for these things, then finally your life will be worth living.
I'm so glad you're saying this. I'm like waving my arms up in the air in excitement that you say this.
Well, this is all the fashion industry stuff.
Yes.
This is my expertise. I know the hard psychological fucktitude that that this institute, like, that all these magazines just totally break us.
The magazines teach us that we have to be obsessed with our body and beauty. And this is a form of oppression against women, because if we're obsessed with our body and beauty, we don't actually think about things and that are real important to us, like breaking ceilings, or what is it, like being productive at work or whatever else. And so we get stuck in this oppressed system of focusing on our looks versus focusing on what's important. Whereas our male counterparts, they have this in some capacity. Yes, there's the fit, but even like dad bods are like a thing where overweight dads are like considered sexy. Like, where's the mom bods? Like, that's what I want to know. Like,
oh my God, we should. Well, neither of us are moms. Who of our listeners wants our support in starting a trend with hashtag mombod? Like, we will
totally
get behind that shit.
So we stay oppressed because we're obsessed with our bodies, we're obsessed with beauty, we pour money. There's so many great documentaries on Netflix. People, educate yourself. There's one on beauty and how people spend something like $30,000 a year on beauty products.
Wow.
And that's ridiculous. And it's not your fault. It's the societal's fault of keeping us stuck in the system of focusing on our looks versus focusing on building our intellect
and focusing on our lack and focusing on our debt and like all of these
fixing
things
ourselves.
Yeah.
So then we have credit cards, which many people view as like free money and free candy, because you have to, like Bri said, keep up with the Jonases, and credit card is the way to do that.
Joneses.
What did I say?
Jonas.
Oh, well.
It's not like the brothers.
Well, we get to keep up with them, right? Or something. Keep up with the Jones.
Keep up with Joe Jonas.
Yes. Well, okay, whatever. I'm Brazilian. I don't have to know these things. What were we ranting about?
Keeping up with the Joneses.
All right, keeping up with the Joneses. It's just, so then we accumulate credit card debt, house debt, student loan debt, and yet what we learn in the documentary Minimalism, which is also available on Netflix, is that we are also...
That is not a promotion.
I'm a huge promoter of Netflix. They should be our sponsors. Which is that we're actually the most unhappy that we've ever been. The more choices of products, consumer products that are available to us, the unhappier we become. The more stuff we have access to buying, the more unhappier we become. And it's clear that things will not bring happiness. And yet, we live in a consumeristic society that tells us that having the newest iPhone means something about you. We're so guilty of that.
I'm reminding you of this conversation in when's the next one coming out?
That's not to say that you can't use your money intentionally if you like certain things. Like, if for you specifically, you love shoes.
But it's coming from a different place.
Yeah.
Do you see how it's coming from a place of, instead of being attached to that form to complete you, you all are already complete, and you're using this form just as like an exciting, fun supplement to your wholeness.
Yes. Yeah. And so getting into a little bit specific about Bri and I's experience with my experience, not I am grammatically correct individual here.
Oh, good.
With my experience with debt, we want to kind of shed our story a little bit to demystify the fact that a lot of people view debt with shame, specifically credit card debt. You may have made some bad decisions in the past, or like what Bri and I have. Yeah, Bri and what I have done. Bri and I have done.
We are not. Come on.
Okay.
Enough with the grammar.
Okay.
Like, no one cares.
Okay, I mean, we're gonna have some internet hater that's gonna be judging me.
Call us out on our grammar by all means. If that's the biggest thing you get from this podcast, by all means, call us out on our grammar.
Yes. So maybe you're like us and you used credit cards to support you in entrepreneurial journey. You know, I remember when Bri and I hosted one of our very first Amplify dinners here in Los Angeles, and it was a theme of vulnerability, and we all went around and shared something pretty vulnerable about ourselves. And one beautiful woman shared, for the first time in my life, I paid rent on my credit card. And she had so much shame around that. And pretty much everyone at the table was like, I've done that before. I know exactly where you are. We too. Us too. But we don't talk about it. We don't talk about how this unhealthy, the quote unquote unhealthy debt, the credit card debt, is very shame and ostracized in our country. But we can actually view it in a different way. And that's what Bri and I want to introduce to you. You don't have to look at your past spendings with judgment. I know a lot of women say, I don't trust myself spending money. I think this is a huge concern that people come to us with when they're talking about coaching or investing in themselves as well. I've made some really bad spending decisions in the past, and I can't really trust myself around money. And so we'd rather just turn away from money, give it to our partners or our husbands or whatever. It's like, just not even look at it. And neglect that finances and supporting ourselves in this conversation of finances is actually very, very important, and it is part of women's liberation.
It is so important. If you do not know what's going on with your money, what's going on with your investments, if you do not know even when you're spending your money, what kinds of companies are you spending your money with? I mean, the whole conversation of money is so important for women.
Yeah.
Thais and I recently went to this great event from one of our friends about money and like women taking ownership for money. It is a huge, huge, huge responsibility that we all have. Like Thais said, it's not about shame. You know, would I have done some things differently in my past? Maybe. But I don't feel bad about it.
So the first thing to
decisions.
look, so the first thing to look is first, let's remove the shame. Okay, let's do this in steps because we learned that's in steps. So let's do this in steps. Step number 1: notice if you have shame around your debt, whether it's considered quote unquote good debt by society or bad debt. Just start to notice the belief system that you're carrying. One of the belief systems that I was taught beautifully by my dad with all the best intentions, where he had me sit down at the kitchen table. I got my first credit card at 16. So from 16 to 18, my parents paid my credit card every month. But I couldn't just spend whatever. Like, it was only on things that they allowed me to spend it on, so they could teach me how to use a credit card properly. It was actually great education. And every month, we would go through everything I've spent and add it up and then write a check, old school, like count it in QuickBooks. I had to learn fucking QuickBooks at 16 years old and like get really acquainted with the fact that every month you pay your credit card off in full. That's what I was taught from the very beginning. Credit card is not a loan. It's 22% interest. You do not want that type of debt in your life. You only use a credit card to pay it off every month in full. So this is a beautiful belief that was instilled in me. So you can imagine when I made an investment in my business and I couldn't take out a business loan. So I used the resources I had available to me, which is a credit card. And I put a $7,000 transaction on my credit card, knowing that I was not going to be able to pay it off in full next month. You can imagine the fear that I had. And not just fear, the shame. And not just shame, but fear. But not just fear, but shame, right? Like layer upon layer.
Like terror.
Of terror. And I really had to re-examine this belief and ask myself, am I really a bad, irresponsible, negligent woman? Because 1 month in my entire life, I may not be able to pay this credit card off in full. Guess what? I'm not a bad person. The news flash here. But I had to deconstruct that belief around my shame around money. Because if there is shame, there is no power. And you cannot make powerful decisions around things like money if you experience so much shame that you can't even look at it.
So this was something very similar to me too. Mama Sealy also taught me that you paid off your credit cards in full every month. And this was something that in going into fashion is a fucking expensive adventure. Like, it's expensive. Before you even get to make anything, you have to drop a good like 15, 20 grand, like just to get materials. So here I was going into all this debt for fashion, and I stopped also being able to pay my credit card bills in full every month. And I also went through this cycle of like, because this is my definition of success, my definition of success is being able to pay all my bills on time in full every month. All of a sudden, I'm not doing that, which then means that I am a failure.
Yes.
And that was the story that I started carrying around for many, many, many years. I have credit card debt. I can't pay my bills in full. Therefore, I am a failure. And I had to do a very similar thing where I stepped back and was like, is that my truth? Is my truth that I am a failure? No, that is not my truth. I'm wildly successful. So if I'm carrying this belief that I must pay my bills in full every month, and I'm wildly successful, both of those things cannot coexist in my life. So I had to choose. And I chose to believe that I was successful. With debt, I have debt and I am successful.
I accumulated over $20,000 in credit card debt.
Oh, that's it?
I had a beautiful, beautiful client who's like, I have so much credit card debt. And I was like, how much? And she was like, 4,000. And I inappropriately started laughing because, to some people, 4,000 is a lot. And I honor you if that's you and whatever. And anyway, I accumulated a roughly 20, I think it actually was 20 to $25,000 in credit card debt. And I had it spread out over 3 cards, and I felt like I was failing, and I felt like I was inadequate. I was terrified of the fact that I was making these minimum payments, but the account wasn't going down because the interest is so terrifying. I wasn't even able to look at my finances for a whole year. I literally couldn't even, I didn't even know how I was paying my bills. Sometimes I didn't, sometimes I was. I never defaulted. Nothing ever bad in that capacity happened. But what's interesting is that there was a point where I thought I was going to go bankrupt. And I remember when I was younger, my step aunt actually went bankrupt. She opened up a restaurant business, and I don't know the specific details of it, but she opened up a restaurant business and they went bankrupt. And I just remember the way my dad talked about it and the way the family talked about it. It was shameful. Like, she didn't account for her money properly. Like, it was a fail. And so I took that on as, if I go bankrupt, I'm failing. I am a failure at life. Just like Bri. I am the worst I am irresponsible. I'm the worst type of person in the world. And I fortunately never went bankrupt, but I came close, and I really had to reevaluate everything I knew about bankruptcy, about credit cards, about whether that really made me a bad person, or just someone who may not have made the right decisions in the past, or felt like they made the right decisions but didn't really understand the consequences, or whatever. But does there have to be so much judgment and shame? And I've actually become stronger now because of it. I've actually now can hold a lot more money in and out of my business because of that experience. That's not to say you need to have credit card debt to learn more about money, but I actually now can make a $20,000 transaction and not blink. Now I can accept the type of money into my life, and I can accept that flow of money out of my life. Like, I can make a payment of $70,000 and not blink, and I can also accept $70,000 and not blink because I've had to look at it. I've had to deal with it. And what I did, and maybe this will serve you guys, is I actually called every single one of my credit cards and I asked them to help me out. And
I've done this before as well.
I've asked them to what can I do to get the interest rate low? Like, I'm committed to closing this card. I'm committed to paying this off, but I need some help right now. It's too much. And so one of my banks actually said, we can't fucking help you, but we'll connect you with a credit a credit agency, not a credit agency, I forget what they call it, that can help you.
Debt consolidation.
Debt consolidation. Thank you. And I got connected to a beautiful debt consolidation company who was able to consolidate all my credit cards into and negotiate with the credit card companies into very, very low rates. I actually pay like 1% on one of my cards, and I just make a monthly payment every single month. And I'm committed to that right now, and it feels really good. And eventually I'll pay that off. But I'm not making it mean anything about me that I have or do not have credit card debt. Now that's, again, we're not saying go have credit card debt, or that
I was just gonna say,
or that be responsible with your spending, or that even credit card debt is a good way of investing in your business. We're not saying any of that. We're just inviting that if you already have credit card debt, to remove some of the shame.
Yeah.
And to know that you have choices. You have things that you can do about it. Because I'm in this debt consolidation company, I actually can't open up a new card. So I've committed to the card that I have that I pay off every month in full. And I have my debt consolidation, and that feels really good right now. And next year when we have this conversation, I may be in a different place. But the point is, I don't have shame. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm doing the best that I can. I'm making money. I'm making impact. I'm doing what lights me up. So why am I going to place shame around the tools that were available to me at the time to support me in growing my life and my business the way I wanted to grow?
The other thing that's really helped me is taking responsibility for my spending habits. And so, one thing I really like to look at is spending versus investing. And there are certain purchases in your life that may look like debt as the time at the time. However, depending on your perspective, they can actually result in being an investment instead of an expenditure.
Yeah.
So, for example, I signed on to a mastermind, and in January had to pay the first installment of the mastermind, and I had to call my credit card company and up my limit on my card so that I could pay this first installment. And I was even still experiencing a little bit of shame. Like, how dare I ask for extra money from my credit union? And
Pause. If you guys haven't done this yet, call every single one of your company credit cards, any credit card you have, and ask them to increase your limit on all of your cards. Do it right now. Get off the phone, get off the podcast, call every single one of your credit card companies and ask them to increase your limit. Not because you're increasing your spending, but because it's actually really good for your credit. Because it shows that you can hold more credit on your line, and that means that you're more responsible of a citizen. So, like, one of my cards, I have a $20,000 limit. Does that mean I'm spending $20,000? No, but it means, one, I could if I wanted to, but two, the banks trust me to have that type of credit line, and that's really good for your credit because your credit works by your debt equity ratio, and so the more that you can hold space for your equity, the more that ratio changes. Okay, so go right now, call all of your credit card companies. It's super easy. They'll ask you for your income. They'll ask you how much you want it to be raised by. I always go like $50,000. I go really extreme. And they're like, you've been approved for $5,000. They'll let you know what you've been approved for. It doesn't matter. Just say yes to it. Extend your credit lines so that you can increase your credit. Okay, back to you, Bri.
So I made this expenditure in the energy of that it is an investment. This coaching program is all about teaching people how to be whole life millionaires. So I'm like, awesome. Well, if I'm investing, a few $1,000s here, the expectation that I then have of myself is to make exponentially more than what I've put in it. I like to see it as a stock market. And so for me, looking at that, yes, technically it's a debt right now, but I'm not looking at it with that negative, like, well, there's money out the door, or this energy that it's somehow gone. I invested that money purposefully, knowing that there's more coming on the back end.
I love it. I have two things I want to share, and they're both very completely different from one another. So I want to talk about two things so you can remind me and hold me accountable as we actually go into the conversation. Okay?
I'll do my best.
One thing is, let's talk about women who have said, I have had bad spending habits in the past. I don't trust myself to make new spending decisions, especially in this capacity, like this size of an investment. And two, I want to talk about...
Actually, pause. Let's just address that one, and then I'll have you write down the other one, and we can go into that. So I love this conversation because so often we do judge ourselves so deeply and so heavily. If we say, buy a house at 26 that then you have to short sell, that all of a sudden I'm like, well, I'm bad at spending money because I spent money on something
Mm-hmm.
that, this or that or the other. It's the story that we tell about whatever that situation is. And so for me, like one of the biggest things, and like I said, it's the only thing I regret. I say that lightly, like I've done the work to move through this, but the biggest thing is really forgiving yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's the first key step for me was like I didn't know any better. I was told by people that were much older than me that like this was a great investment. And at the time, the knowledge that I had, it was a great investment. I didn't have the knowledge that I'd be moving to Los Angeles in 2 years and basically be abandoning my house. So, that was a huge step for me was based on the information that I had at the time, I made the right decision.
Yeah.
And so I forgave myself for, all of this judgment, this anger, this resentment that I carried around for making this decision.
Women carry a lot of emotional charge around money, and a lot of our worthiness is tied to money. And Brie and I have talked about this before. But what's really important to remember is that your past doesn't have to be your future. Just because you've made one or two, quote unquote, bad decisions in the past doesn't mean you're going to make it in the future. You're a different person now. You're in a different place now. And so when I spend money and when I'm thinking about whether or not to spend money, I do a couple of things. One, if it's a really big decision, in the past, I've made really fuck it, let's just do it and deal with the consequences of it later sort of decisions. And every single time I have made that decision specifically around money, ended up not being for the best. So now I refuse to make that type of decision in the moment. I really allow myself to think about it thoroughly, to invite in the people that see me already as the billionaire woman, right? So like I'll invite Bri to talk about this or my boyfriend to talk to me about this because they see my potential. They don't want me to stay where I am. So investments generally tend to be a little scary. And we know that that's initial fear. So I talk to people who see my potential first. And I bounce it off my head and I really sit with, does this feel aligned? Does this feel like what I want to do? I do not make the decision in the moment anymore because it's not necessary. We don't need to make emotional decisions in this erratic place of possibilities. If it doesn't have to be that way. You can make really beautiful, big, scary decisions and sit on it for a little while. So I've given myself permission to do that and not make decisions in the moment. And I've also really, really, really done the work, like Bri said, to forgive my past spendings, forgive my past whatever, and really trust that if this feels in full alignment with me, like if what I'm spending feels fully aligned with the woman I want to become and it really excites me, the money to pay it off will come. I really trust that. Money is just a flow of energy. We've talked about this. It comes. It just comes as you do the work, as you create the mindset to cultivate that. And every time I've had to go to pay my credit card, every time I've had to go pay my stuff, money has shown up. So why is it that I now believe that that's not going to happen now that I've had this payment or this thing? So I really commit to believing that money flows where energy goes, that I have these tools in my disposal to set myself up for success. And why am I going to define my success by how much debt I carry? That just seems silly. And a lot of people will say that the billionaires of the world carry a lot of debt too. It requires you to invest in yourself in order to make money in certain capacities. It requires that type of energy.
Didn't Kanye say he was bankrupt or something, or what was
Oh
his
yeah,
whole thing?
yeah. It's just we have to start looking at money and not being so scared of it. We have to not be so scared of it. Okay. So let's talk about the other thing that I want to talk about, which is retirement and the concept of retirement. Because in our society, we are built to create insurances for ourselves. Like we have health insurance, car insurance, and retirement is a form of insurance that when you're 60 or whatever years old, you now have a pool of money in your bank account that you can live from. And with the support of the state, you don't have to work anymore. And it's a great concept in theory. You're old. You don't want to work. I wouldn't want to work. You don't want to be in a factory when you're 70 years old. You want to be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor and have a pool of money that you can play off of. Here's what's scary though, Bri. The majority of Americans, I think something like 70% of Americans, don't have a single dime of money in their retirement?
Do you want to know how much I have in my retirement?
How much?
I'll be 100% fully transparent here. As of today, I have $137 in my retirement
Well, that's
account.
more than me. I have 0.
Do you want to know what I had 2 years ago?
How much?
I think I had like $35,000.
Wow, I didn't know this.
So, well, my mom, if you guys don't know yet, Mama Sealy is the bomb.
She's the bomb.com.
She started planning for retirement for me when I was born.
Oh, that's amazing.
Like, started putting money away, all the things. So I had all these beautiful retirement accounts. And not to say that wasn't all her. You know, I saved some as well. I had a 401k. Like all the things, right? And 2015 came and I shut down my fashion brand. And all of a sudden I had 0 money coming into my life. 0.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of faced with I get a job, which since y'all know me, never fucking happening. Or moving back to Minnesota to live on my parents' couch, which, since you all know me, that's never fucking happening. Or, I had this $35,000 worth of saved money that I could use to support myself.
Yeah.
And talk about fucking shame. Like, I couldn't even tell Mama Sealy that I was using that money until like a year later.
Yeah.
I couldn't even admit that I had cashed in all of my retirement money to support myself, to pay my rent, to feed me, to keep my electricity going in a year when I really, really, really needed it. And I have to say, it was my financial advisor, who I love dearly. I just went to see her when I was in Olympia. I love her. She said to me, you saved this money for your future.
This is your future.
And she's like, this may not look the way you thought it was going to look. But even by you using this money to pay for your rent and your food and your electricity now is giving you the opportunity to build an even greater future for yourself.
Yeah.
And she's like, even though this money was quote unquote saved for when you were old, like, use it.
Yeah.
And don't feel bad about it. And when I got to go see her last week, I'm putting more money than that away back into my retirement accounts.
Yeah, so I've cashed out my 401k twice. Once to buy a mattress, where I was sleeping on the floor in a sleeping bag for over a year. And we had recently moved from a place that had carpet on the floor to a place that had hardwood on the floor. And we needed a bed. And I needed a bed. We couldn't sleep on the sleeping bag on the floor. It's actually kind of embarrassing.
I haven't heard this story about you.
Yeah, this was when I was living in New Jersey. And I cashed out my 401k to buy my fucking bed that I still love. It's in my parents' home now. Every time I sleep in that bed, I'm like, this is my bed, baby. This was hard-earned 401k money. Clearly, I didn't have that much in my 401k, but I had also, this was back in my early 20s. I worked for like a year and a half, okay? And then the second time I cashed out my 401k was when I quit my full-time job, again, to move to California and to go into my business full-time. And I needed that money. I needed that money to live and support myself. And, there's a big punishment for cashing out your 401k early, and that punishment feels really guilt-ridden, like you're doing a bad thing. But here's the thing. First off, I'm not setting myself up to retire. Sorry, no offense. I don't want to retire. I love my life. I'm going to, of course, set up passive income so that at a certain age, I don't have to, be in the move as much. But I love what I do. I want to be writing books until I die. Like, I want to be speaking and teaching until I die. I'm not living my life to retire. I'm not working hard now for some ideation of retirement in the future. Luckily, I have that privilege of having that life. And secondly, if you can't afford to live in this moment, why are you saving? It just doesn't make sense. Saving for a rainy day anticipates a rainy day. So again, not saying to spend beyond your means. Be really responsible. Look at your money, people. Like, we're not inviting you to have credit card debt or cash out your 401k. We're just saying there is no shame if that's what you have to do to survive in this moment, to make something passionate of yourself.
Yeah, we're definitely not sharing this with you to tell you that this is what you should do. We are sharing this from the perspective of, if you have to do this, be easy on yourself. You're not alone.
Yeah.
I've had so many conversations about debt with women, and all of us, to an extent, carry some form of debt.
And shame.
And so much shame. Like, why don't we all just get the fuck over it? Because everyone has it.
Yeah.
So, like, can we just move on yet?
Yeah.
Because it's wasting our energy. It's diverting our focus from things that are actually fucking important in the world.
Yes.
And so
we need women entrepreneurs. We need women who are financially literate. We need women who are taking charge of investing their money in things that matter. We need all of these things. So do what you need to do, educate yourself, bring in the resources, bring in the support system so you can start stepping into that role, because you are needed and your money holds tremendous power. Bri and I have talked about this form of activism. Where you spend your money matters. So be cognizant. Don't just swipe your credit card and hope that you can pay it later. Be conscientious about what's happening in the in and out, trusting that you're supported, trusting that you are intelligent, that you never that let me just say one thing. If there's anyone I'm going to go on a risk for, if there's anyone I'm going to invest in, if there's anyone that I'm going to go into credit card debt for, it's me. Because I know I will never fail myself. I know I will do what it takes to succeed. I've never let myself down before. Sure, made mistakes, never let myself down. And I won't let myself down in the future. So if there's anyone that I trust more in my money, is me. And therefore, I'm not going to have shame around it. I'm not going to have shame around my debt consolidation. I'm not going to have shame that I don't have a retirement fund right now. I'm not going to have shame that I make a tremendous amount of money in my business and in Amplify. I'm not going to have shame in any capacity in my financial well-being, because this is how women are liberated. By removing the shame, having the conversations, getting the support, investing in each other, and then doing the fucking work so that we can have equal rights under the law.
And mic drop. I feel like we should wrap this up because, like,
this feels really good.
After that, literally, what else is there to say?
This feels really good. We love you all. Mm-hmm. We support your financial well-being. We so fight for you. We're so fighting for you. We're fighting for your success. We're fighting for you to make all the money you dream of. 80% of people never make the money that they dream of, but that is not you, my amplified person. You are going to succeed. Believe in yourself. Fucking believe in yourself. Let go of these stories, please.
And if you cannot believe in yourself, let us believe in you in the meantime for you. That is what the Amplify community is for. We are here. The rising tide raises all ships. If you cannot believe in yourself, come into our Facebook group. Let's have a conversation. We will believe in you for you until you're able to do it for yourself. All right. So you can find us at beamplified.community. Thais and I are in there all the time, throwing love and support and igniting deeper conversations. And we want you to be part of it.
And if you think you have it really bad, go to a third world country. Go to Brazil. Go to India. You'll see what real poverty is. Go walk in those slums. And then really remember how much more power you have by supporting yourself in your finances. The world needs a woman to rise, to be activated. And this is how we start. Let us do this work.
All right. Go be amplified, all of our amplified people, and we will talk to you next week.